Pawn shop workers at Reddit. What is the dumbest thing a customer has brought in thinking they were gonna strike us rich? One time this guy brought in a chair he said Lincoln satin. I called my Lincoln chair guy and he said it was fake. Worked at a traditional games store. Had plenty of sketchy white trash people coming in with their kids' old Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic cards thinking they're extremely valuable. Usually it was just a mismatched starter set from the early 2000s. Or the like. I'm not sure what started the idea that old trading cards were going to be ridiculously valuable. But no, I won't give you meth money for your dark magician. The level of disappointment, and oftentimes outright anger on their part, was difficult to deal with. I began just telling trashy looking people, who weren't store regulars, that we didn't purchase cards. Did once have a guy bring in a collection that had a gnarly looking Black Lotus. Gave him a good deal for it. There was a buy and sell by my house that would give you $5 for any game and sell every game for 10. I used to go in and check prices on all games, and if I would make more than 10 from GameStop I would buy the game. Go to GameStop and sell it, and then buy all the crappy games GameStop had that were less than $5 and take it back to the buy and sell to make more money. I was a heroin addict at the time, so that was my job when I wasn't working at the restaurant. Edit. My and working. Had a guy try get $100 for 2 wheat pennies and 2 buffalo nickels. 4-legged. About 5 years ago I had a guy call the store and ask if we took GPSs. I told him we did. Then he asked the address to the store. I told him. Then he asked me how to get there. A kid from my school had a letter signed by Abraham Lincoln. He brought it to show and tell one day, and we were all super impressed. In grade 12. He stole it from his dad and went to pawn it. He bragged about how he was going to be rich. It turns out his grandfather forged the letter and gave it to his dad as a gift. A thief stole our heavy-duty snowblower out of the garage in early July during a heat wave and took it to a local pawn shop, hoping to fetch a big price for it. After the police called to say they had located it, the pawn shop owner said the guy just couldn't understand why there wouldn't be a hot market for an expensive snowblower year-round. Comic book shop employee. Every single seller has a totally mint collection and a first appearance of Superman or Batman. There have been literally hundreds of Batman Superman #1s printed over the years. Every time they reboot a series, it starts at issue #1. The people who were polite about it, I didn't mind. The people who thought we were trying to rip them off and that their books were priceless just did my head in. Not a pawn shop, but GameStop. Dude rolled in with hundreds of bootleg games and a bunch of modded consoles. He couldn't fathom why I wouldn't take them. A good friend of mine owns a pawn shop in Florida. He once bought a collectible book of state quarters for less than face value of the coins. The customer wasn't bright enough to pop the quarters out of the book and spend them. My buddy's ability to keep a straight face in those situations and make the customer feel like he's getting a deal provides me endless entertainment. My dad had some drugged up women come in and try to pawn her crack. I took an old $10 bill into a dealer to see how much it was worth. Don't recall the year, but it was old. Guy says $10. Showed me what a bill would have to be like. Spent 30 minutes in his store with him looking at old rare money. Edit. Changed to rare. I'm a pawnbroker. Somebody brought in their dead grandmother's gold tooth, plucked from her ashes, with the tooth still in it. We told her that the tooth had to be separated from the gold for us to weigh it. They desecrated their loved one's remains for less than $2. Not a pawn shop worker, but this is still kind of a cool story, or at least I think. Either way, both the shop owner and I were happy with the events that went down. I used to frequent yard sales, buy vintage items, and then take them to the antique shop and make a little money on the side. One day, I found this little glass figurine at a yard sale for $25. When I flipped the item over and saw the red Occupied Japan logo, I got extremely excited and bought it on the spot. I took it over the shop and sold it for $45. The shop owner wouldn't go any higher, but hey, I made $44.75 of a quick purchase, so I wasn't too worried. The figure was actually worth about $125. Either way, I made money, and that figure is still sitting in his shop for sale at $125. A guy literally brought in an RPG. He was doing yard work for this old lady whose husband had passed. She gave it to him for doing some yard work, not realizing it was live and active. The guy was career military, and after the bomb squad came and disabled it, they went to her house and found a trove of similarly very illegal military grade weapons. I don't work in a pawn shop, but I bought my first guitar in one. The big defense contractor in my town laid off over 10,000 people overnight and the contagion spread. I was looking for my first guitar, and I'm cheap. After checking the music stores, I hit up the pawn shops near work. While I'm looking, this clean-cut guy in his early 30s comes in trying to pawn his guitar, hard case, and effects. Since the shop had a bunch, they offered him crap, evidently, and he left. He was almost crying, saying he got laid off and had to pay some bills. I followed him out and asked him what he wanted for it. He said $100, and I took it. I also gave him my phone number and said he could buy it back when he got back on his feet. I never heard from him. I'm looking at it now, and played for months. I hope everything worked out for him. I may be late to this, but I worked at a pawn shop for about 6 years. I once had a customer walk up to the counter and slide a gold coin to me and say, "I think this is gold." Man, this particular customer reeked of bile and looked like he was high on everything possible. I looked at the coin and slid it back to him and replied, "I think it's a Chuck E. Cheese token. I can tell by the mouse on it." He just said, "Oh," and walked away. That was when I noticed he had it his pants to the point it was almost all the way down his pant leg. A friend's uncle allowed us to shadow him for a day at his pawn shop. A guy walked in with a metal lockbox and said he had something worth billions. He opened the lockbox and there were wood chips in it and the smell of spray paint. He claimed they were leftovers of the cross Jesus was crucified on. He is descended from an ancient and noble line of knights who took oaths to protect the cross. He wanted $2,000 for the lockbox and wood chips. I worked in a jewelry store during the peak of the everybody buys gold and diamonds phase. A group of kids comes in with a ring they found in the parking lot. It's an obvious CZ, which I tell the ringleader, "Hell." As soon as he hands it to me, one of the others demands, a touch annoyed, "How do you know?" In one of those excellent two rare moments of perfect reaction, I asked, "Why'd you bring it to me?" "Because you're a jeweler." "Oh." Had a guy try selling me a gun. Before I could even nope him out of there. Shop is an NJ. We do not buy guns. He began to point the gun around with people all over the store, pulling the trigger. That guy was a special kind of guy. Fortunately the gun wasn't loaded, but still. As a worker in the ghetto, I get grills and gold teeth almost daily, straight from the mouth, and then they get mad when I can't accept it and throw a fit. Every employee wears panic buttons to call the cops immediately if something happens as well. My mom owned the pawn shop in town and she was a huge New Kids in the Block fan. Unfortunately eBay decimated our business and she couldn't afford to see their reunion concert. But her best friend from grade school could. She came in the next morning, wielding what she claimed was a condom full of Joey McIntyre's cum. You could be the mom of a new kid. She wanted $1,000 for the stuff, but my mom told her friend to stick it up her vajayjay. Babbage's, aka GameStop, worker in the early 2000s. This was a case of the company being dumb. GameStop either owned or acquired Funcoland and a couple other game store brands at the time, Babbage's being among them. We had a local guy that would drive about an hour each way and buy out every single copy of certain NES games and then bring them to our store. He would do the same in reverse as well. The company would then dutifully redistribute the games to equalize inventory between the stores. All told, he made close to $50K before they figured it out and disallowed transactions of 10 games or more in one visit. Last I heard, this same guy was churning MS, manufactured spending, on gift cards, credit cards, etc. to the tune of $60 $70K a year. Dude knows how to hustle. I mean pretty much anything. People came in all the time thinking they could sell or pawn something for almost as much as they bought it new. Our policy was generally to buy for 25% of the new price, and only hire if it was an interesting or high value item. I always hated jewelry because you just knew the person was going to get pissed at your lowball offer. I paid $10k for this at the jewelers and here's the receipt and insurance certificate. Unfortunately we go by the weight of the gold, which has a fluctuating market price, and the size and quality of the diamond. Going by our rates I can't offer more than $200. And I can't blame them for feeling insulted. It sucks because while some people pawn stuff to feed their drug habit, which sucks for them too, yeah, no, many of them do it because their power is going to be shut off, or they can't afford food for their kids, or their husband's medical bills are slowly creeping up and hell, I haven't worn this ring for years. Who cares if my grandmother gave it to me? It's gotta be worth thousands. Or the 100 other reasons poverty ducking blows. But you have to sit there and be stubborn. Because you're poor too and your ducking at face boss will deduct anything overpaid from your check. Pawn shops give you cool stories, but it crushes your soul. I don't work at the pawn shop, but my friend does. People bring in dumb it all the time to get a few dollars for dope. It starts from a candies box stolen from a shop next to the pawn shop to plungers, rubber ducks, electronics, real and fake jewelry they thought was real and ending on cars. I just have to say, I've only tried to sell something to a pawn shop once, some kind of CB radio setup and related components, and they offered me $20. When I told them that wasn't enough they laughed at me and said I wouldn't get a better offer anywhere else. I ended up selling it on Craigslist for $300. I worked in a pawn shop for around 7 years or so. We had people trying to pawn fake jewelry all the time. The best part was when they didn't know it was fake. So many women left yelling about that cheap son of a bitch. I can't even remember half the stupid it we turned away. There was one thing that we didn't turn away and we should have though. And I love this story. One of the other employees took in what he described as a 24k gold baby bracelet. It was a cock ring. A golden cock ring. This employee was a bit of a know-it-all, and he liked to rub other people's mistakes in their faces. He eventually went on to become manager, and then district manager. And you can bet your ass I made sure that every employee under him knew about the baby bracelet. He never lived that down. Not a pawn shop worker, but I was in one with a friend of mine when a man who looked to have enjoyed more than just a few crack rocks in his day came in sight out with a sink. A sink that he apparently just ripped out of a hotel or kitchen of an abandoned house or something. And I do mean ripped out. No idea what he thought he would get for it. But the guy behind the counter told him in no uncertain terms that he needed to leave and take his sink with him. It was goddamn hilla. Edit, it was pretty hilla. You just had to be there. Pawn shops are not like that TV show. People don't bring in valuable antiques to be appraised. I would guess the most likely answer for real pawn shops is wedding rings that end up being fake. One time this guy brought in a giant petrified turd and thought it was a meteor. I literally just had a lady walk out on me angry that I couldn't offer any money on her small wooden spice rack. It even had half empty spices still on it. A few months ago an old man came in with a trash bag full of used bongs, complete with weed and dripping with bong water. Said he's selling all his son's stuff. He was such a sweet old dude I felt bad and told him to break it all up in the dumpster outside and not ride around with it. I get a ton of old coins that people bring in thinking they're worth a bunch of money and I usually have even older stuff in my change drawer that I can show them. Most people laugh about it. Also, I have seen quite a few gently used dildos in my time as well. I'm sure this will stay buried, but we combat a lot of people coming in with stupidly high asking prices by keeping an equivalent item in stock at a reasonable price. For example, the 1780 Austria silver thaler has Maria Theresa original, goes for a lot of money, but almost all of them are reproductions. The original dies were never destroyed and were used to make the reproductions. Therefore they look exactly like the originals. One day we had a father and son come and super excited. They finally hit the lotto. They showed me their Austria thaler. I offered them a little bit shy of the silver content, which was $20 at the time, and the father got super pissed. He claimed we were trying to rip him off. That's understandable, I thought, because it was almost identical to the expensive version. So, I tried to explain to him that there's hundreds of thousands of reproductions. He still didn't get it. His son did. So, Now his son and I tried to get him to come around and he wouldn't. That's when I went to the back room, pulled out a bucket with about 15 of the same type of phaler that he brought in and told him if he thought they were worth thousands of dollars, I'd sell mine to him for $22 each. He never flinched and said, "I'm not here to buy these. I'm here to sell mine." At that point, I just said, "We aren't buying those phalers anymore. Have a nice day." I went to college in a farm town in northern Colorado. I had a red leather jacket that I bought in high school that I wanted to sell in one of the pawn shops out there. I never wore it and would rather have cash than the jacket. I didn't want money for drugs, just money because I was a broke college student. They refused to buy it because it was red and that color was somehow gang related. I had no idea that farm town had any gang problems, but whatever. Worked at a comic book and memorabilia store, and people have really messed up notions of value. Just because it is old doesn't mean it is valuable. Just because it is rare doesn't mean there is a market for it. The worst was when people would come in with things that were signed with no authentication and demand outrageous prices. Some old lady and her obviously tweaker granddaughter brought in a comic they claimed was signed by Stan Lee and wanted $1,000 for it. We laughed them out of the shop. Also, a picture of you with William Shatner that he signed has no value to anyone but you. A penny that was dated 2009. I'm not a pawn shop owner, but when I was 10 or 11 I caught a black widow spider and excitedly brought it to the pawn shop in town inside a Mountain Dew bottle, ready to claim my bounty. They weren't interested. Pet shop wouldn't take it either. I made a cardboard sign and stood on the side of the road, but I never found a buyer.